Hello, everybody. My name is Lauren Jauregui, just in case this goes outside of my platform. Welcome, everyone. I'm a little nervous. Today, I am going to be speaking to the first third-party candidate that I'm going to be lending my platform to. I want to just kind of put a preface on the situation so that people outside of, those who know me and those who keep up with what I'm saying can kind of get an understanding of where I'm coming from and why I'm doing this. So first and foremost, all of you know that I'm quite politically active. So I am still politically active, but I have seen that Marianne Williamson has dropped out of the presidential run. And although I'm still going to be writing her name in the primaries, I think that it's really important to me that Americans, whoever kind of can get into this, have the opportunity to understand that there are more candidates available to us and options available to us outside of the two-party system. I personally am not going to be voting for Biden or Trump because I believe that they're both right-wing fascists, and I absolutely do not think that the people of America need another establishment fascist or billionaire class representative in office, especially considering the conditions that we are all living under. The majority of us are living under in these unprecedented and very serious times. I don't think that it is appropriate for us to only be online screaming and tweeting and being really upset about the way that either candidate of the two-party system moves. I think it's kind of a waste of our time and breath. I still believe really deeply in local elections as well. There are a lot of seats up this year for Congress and Senate. And I do believe that it's still our duty to, if nothing else, be politically educated and understand our options. So for me, I'm not endorsing any candidates yet. I am simply lending my platform so that they can tell you about themselves and they can tell you what their agendas are, and they can give you a perspective that maybe I am unable to give. So yeah, I'm going to be having a few different candidates on to discuss their agendas. But today we're starting with Claudia and Karina, who are running with the PSL party. And I'm nervous. I want to preface again, I know that in America, we don't really think outside of the two-party system, and we are very set on capitalism and very set on the ways that capitalism is extractive and all of the propaganda that we've been fed about how great it is for everybody, even though it very much is not. And it actually is constantly sacrificing the working force to prop up those who are already very wealthy. And yeah, we're basically in a situation where the billionaire class is running everything, and they have no consideration for the way that the average American is experiencing reality. And we're moving further and further into this kind of maskless reality. Before, I feel like the liberals had a really good way of talking our ears off about all of the things that they want to do for us that the Republicans cannot offer us. When I say liberals, I mean Democrats. And I feel like it's reached a point where those who they basically fed us Biden and told us there were no other options. They silenced all of our options. And they've made it very clear that the DNC has made it very clear that Biden is their choice candidate, whether the people choose it or not. And so I've just taken it upon myself to create use my platform, to use my platform to highlight other candidates that we have as our options. Again, I am not endorsing anyone yet. I'm simply lending my platform so that they can have a conversation with you, so that they can tell you who they are, and so that you can do your own research and decide for yourself who is worthy of your vote. And again, voting to me is one tactic in the sea of all tactics in dismantling what's going on right now and into in creating a reality where the people are taken care of by the people, for the people, that kind of government that we all talk about being in our Constitution. I deeply believe in that concept, and I deeply believe in the fact that my shit keeps falling. And I deeply believe in the fact that if we use our collective power, we can truly change the way that things are going. And I just refuse to give up. I refuse to give up. I refuse to give in, and I refuse to give in to establishment politics. So this is the first of a few lives that I'm going to be having. Thank you to Claudia and Karina for making the time. So I want to slightly introduce them a little bit before we get started. Did I really do that? Did I really do that? One second, everyone, because I think I deleted their bios that I wrote down. Okay. File undo, edit undo. Nope, don't have that option either. Great, super good. Wow. Let me see if I can. Oh, why did that happen? Okay, give me 1 second. Nope. Can't get out of the live. So this is just, I'm just going to invite them on and they're going to give you their bio. Claudia on now. And I have to find Karina to join us as well. Hi, Mama.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm sorry. I had pulled up the bio that y'all sent me, and
You
then
are so good. It's the IG live streets. That's how they work.
yep, all of the
You're
technology,
good.
you know what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me try to find Karina as well. Yes, I'm inviting her now.
Awesome.
And we'll do our little three ways so that you can introduce yourself to the people.
Sounds good.
Hello, ladies.
Hola.
Hi, thank you for having
Welcome, welcome,
us.
welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and to speak with my followers and whoever else is going to be watching this thing, because you never know with the internet. So,
Well,
um,
thank you for having us, and thank you for using your platform for these type of conversations.
of course, it's literally
And
the least I can be doing at this time.
and
So,
it is very, we do want to commend that it is brave of you, Lauren, because you're going to be attacked for having socialists on
oh,
your show. That's that's definitely coming. You can do anything, right? But you know what? You'll be in good company, because all of the social movements that we have benefited from, the socialists, we're in the middle of it, we're in the front of it, we're with it, and so you can be proud of that long lineage of struggle that we're a part of. So bless you, and
Thank
it says
you.
a lot about you to be able to actually engage, so we appreciate it.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I gave the kind of a preface beforehand. I really just want to use my platform to make sure to highlight all of the options that we have because, in America, I feel like we're a very propagandized population and we're given what to think and how to think and the ways that things are supposed to be. And I just deeply believe in breaking that fourth wall at this point because it's not giving anymore. Like at this point, we have the Democrats and the Republicans. Well, Republicans are like in a whole nother fascist level. I can't even talk to them. But right now, the Democrats, I feel like, are in these masks and pretending that everything is okay and lying to our face about, everyone's great. The economy's better than it's ever been. And everyone that I know personally is very much not experiencing that reality. And, we have Super Bowl commercials focusing on the fact that there's not enough chips in a bag anymore. But like, I believe that there's a lot more important things that are going on because of inflation and because of all of the different ways that the billionaire class has been siphoning our energy, our money, to use it for their own benefit and then contributing nothing back to society, which is just completely unacceptable at this point. Because as we all know, they just passed a bill to send $95 billion over to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. Ukraine and Taiwan, of which are proxy wars with Russia and China. And I really genuinely just want to like talk through and talk about. But before we get into all of that, talk about how our money is being used, American taxpayers, how our money is being used, and how it can be, how we can reimagine, how we can reimagine the reality to be more in alignment with the Constitution, the proposed Constitution, to be more in alignment with the ideals that I hope most Americans do have, which is to use our power of the people for the people. And I believe that your campaign really highlights that, and y'all are in these streets, organizers yourselves, and you have long histories with organizing. And I really just, more than anything, I want you all to introduce yourself. So we can start with Claudia. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Madam President Potential.
Thank you. Thank you so much again. And for, I agree with all your words. So my name is Claudia de la Cruz, and I'm originally from the South Bronx, which is the poorest congressional district in the United States. I was born there to immigrant parents from the Dominican Republic. I actually was able to live in the Dominican Republic for a little bit. And so my experience with the global South and with the Caribbean came from living experience in that setting for a while. I came back and I engaged in doing community organizing and political work at the age of 13. I was welcomed into a church that does liberation theology, which is basically the type of theology that understands that Jesus was one of the first revolutionaries and anti-imperialist. And and I period. And I was there with a lot of folks that were not necessarily Christian, but were very much around engaged in social movement and political activism in the global South. We had folks from Venezuela, folks from El Salvador, which was heavily hit for 10 years, backed by US weapons and money to do so. We had folks that were, exiles from Colombia, which was also being hit by US politics and the war on drugs. So these folks coming from different social movements and political organizations basically formed and shaped my understanding of my conditions in the South Bronx. Helping me understand that poverty wasn't a deficiency of poor people, but it was an imposed condition by capitalist systems, by systems of imperialism. And I became engaged. People are like, but Puerto Rico is the colony of the United States of America. And so there's a lot of Puerto Ricans in the Bronx. Shout out to the Bronx. And a lot of those folks that were independentistas, were folks fighting or continue to fight for the freedom of Puerto Rico, engaged me in campaigns to free political prisoners. And that's where I kind of came into an understanding that there were people who were actually kidnapped by the state, by the US state, for fighting for freedom. Sometimes we learn about that history in the past, but we have over 100 political prisoners in the United States that are Black Panther Party former organizers. And so I started doing work around the freedom of the Puerto Rican political prisoners in the 90s, doing work around getting the US Navy out of Vieques, you name it. Did a lot of work around police brutality with Mothers Against Police Brutality, which were mainly the mother of Amadou Diallo and Anthony Baez and other folks. And so that was kind of like my introduction to doing political campaigning that made sense to me. A lot of work around housing, a lot of work around youth leadership development with different organizations. I co-founded organizations that worked with cultural workers as well. Having culture workers understand the meaning of art in relationship to revolution and movement building. And yes, that's right. and co-founded, in my last years, I co-founded the organization, the People's Forum, which does a lot of political education work and cultural work in relationship to socialist values and socialist ideologies. And so very happy and proud to also be a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, a party that I came in contact with 19 years ago and that I've been in relationship to for that long, but I became a member in 2020.
Beautiful. Karina, can you give us a little bio as well? And then I want to get further into a few of the things that you touched upon, Claudia. But go ahead and introduce yourself, Karina.
Thank you. So my name's Karina. I'm a Chicana from Southern California. My parents are Mexican immigrants. My dad came to this country when he was 16 years old to work. He's worked in metal manufacturing and warehouses all his life. And now when he's in his 60s, just a few years away from hopefully retiring, if that's ever a possibility in this country, he's a roofer. So he does like one of the most dangerous jobs in America. And that's my whole family. And I know that the story of my dad is actually the story of millions of working class people who just can't afford to retire, who have lived here and worked here generation after generation and basically are in the same place. So I was very fortunate in that I was able to get financial aid to be able to go to college. And so I moved to New York when I was 18. And I went to college. I went to Columbia. And I say fortunate, but it really shouldn't be so fortunate, you know? Actually, education should be accessible to everybody, and it shouldn't be like winning the lottery. But the reality is that it was like winning the lottery. So when I got there, I felt like very grateful and fortunate. So I joined all the student activist organizations to try to do something, you know, something, because I knew how impossible it was for somebody from my background to go there. And so I started organizing in a very practical ways. I became part of the student organization United Students Against Sweatshops. And what they did was they used their power as students to put pressure on the universities, to put pressure on sweatshop corporations like Nike, who were exporting their deplorable conditions to the Dominican Republic, to Mexico, to Haiti, all over the world. And we were putting pressure on our university to put pressure on Nike to improve the working conditions of the people in these countries. Um, and so that was sort of like my initial organizing around financial aid, around immigrant rights. And I joined the party in 2006, really through the party's intervention in the immigrant rights struggle, which was, you know, the mega marches at that point, the biggest demonstrations in US history, from the people who everyone said were too afraid and too living in the shadows to defend themselves, to defend their communities. And they came out in these historic numbers. And so that was an experience that really transformed, you know, my my life, really, because it just changed after that. And so I joined the party when I was 20 years old. Shortly after being in the party, when I graduated, I became a teacher and I taught high school math. I took my students to all the protests.
My
We
mom
were
is
out.
my mom's a high school math teacher too.
Oh,
God bless her
yes,
soul.
Math Teachers United.
Yeah, been through it.
Not just about
In Florida,
answers. There are very
so
practical aspects of math. Yes. So you know, like I had a student group. I was part of my union. Like we were coming out against SB 1070. Like we were coming out when Trayvon Martin was killed and protesting against police brutality. So like that was, we were always doing stuff. And then a few years later, my students were about to graduate, and I found out about this job at the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice, where I worked for the last 10 years. And that was an organizing job where I basically traveled around the country, but especially in southern states, in Texas mostly, and Florida. But then also we had bases in Virginia and New York. And so I was organizing around reproductive justice, which brings together, you know, all of the realities of our lives and how our reproductive rights are not just about whether or not we can have an abortion, but whether or not we can raise our children in a healthy environment with dignity and with respect and with everything that we deserve. And then yeah, so that's been where I've worked for the last 10 years, and that's a little bit about my my history.
amazing. Thank you so much for the breakdown. Um, well, first and foremost, I wanted to touch upon kind of your ethos, why you're getting involved in the presidential campaign. What does this look like voting for you? And are y'all on the ballot? Like how are things going with that? Just so that the people can understand like where you stand as third party, like what third party is. Because most people who are watching are like, what do you mean third party? We have a two-party system. So
I could start, and Karina, you could jump in. I think it's important to say that third party options have been there. It's a historical thing. Whether it's independent parties or socialist parties, there's always historically been some sort of intervention during the electoral year. One thing is that, unfortunately, we are not placed in the same position as the corporate duopoly, and it's very intentional. It's very, very intentional. I mean, what would it mean to be on a debate space with Trump and Biden and then say, because US imperialism, and have all these young people Google US imperialism and find out the CIA's greatest hits all over the global South. They don't want to do that. They don't want to have people identify the root of the problem. Instead, they want to be able to use the issues that are real issues for the people as a game of ping pong, political ping pong, where they're just like throwing the ball at each other without having actual no sort of solution to it. And so for us, is kind of coming into that tradition of socialist third party options, where we understand that democracy in this country is a sham. I mean, how democratic could it possibly be to have two parties imposed on you, and not have the possibility of one person, one vote, because you have an electoral college? What type of democracy does that? What type of democracy allows for a president to bypass Congress to be able to pump money into proxy war and into genocide?
And
And
foreign
so,
governments.
and foreign governments, right? They force socialist organizations historically to write a form, which is OFAC, to say that you have a relationship with socialist or communist or foreign governments, but they don't have to fill out that form when they're bumping money into Israel to continue this genocidal extermination of Palestinians. And they don't need to do that when they decide that our tax dollars are going to go to a proxy war in Ukraine. But let me back up for a second.
Right.
We are in the tradition of the socialist parties that intervene to precisely uplift the contradictions of capitalism and the need for a new system. We're within the tradition that speaks against, a government that is primarily prioritizing corporate interest, Wall Street interest, and the interest of US imperialism as a whole. And so, again, it's not a new tendency. It didn't just happen today. Just like the genocide in Gaza is not just happening today, it's been happening for 75 years. But it seems as though this is a crucial historical moment where the gaze has been lifted from the majority of people in this country, and they could start making the connections. And so the intervention in this particular moment is so important because people are awakening and people's consciousness is deepening. And you have a whole generation of young people who have experienced betrayal from the government, from these ruling class institutions, and are saying, we need a new system. We need something new. We can't continue to do the same thing and expect a change. In terms of our ballot access, it's tied to that ruling class democracy. Like, the ruling class doesn't need to fight for ballot access. They don't need to go into the street and petition. They don't need to go and pay for forms to be submitted into these state offices. They actually have the platforms, they have the money, they fund their own campaigns and get financing from these banks, which we don't want financing from banks or any of those people, because ultimately that comes with being only accountable to those banks, not the people. And so when we're talking about ballot access, the Party for Socialism and Liberation has been running candidates for a long time. And we had in the 2020 election about 20 states that we had ballot access in. And we're aiming for more. What we've been telling people is that we will be in as many ballots as people are willing to work to have us. And right now we have a strategy of 23 states, and that is right now. Like, we are just basically hitting the ground running, but that could change. We could have more access. But again, it's a question of petitioning, is a question of campaigning, and it's a question of getting our campaign to the communities that could feel that our message and our platform is actually relevant to their struggles. I don't know, Karina.
Yeah, I mean, and everything we do is about building organization and building a party made up of working class leaders and fighters and bringing them together under one program. Like, we've already lived for a long time where every issue is separated into different organizations, and that benefits the same people who fund them. The same corporations that do all the dirt, that take all the wealth, that take all the resources, then they get to fund their own opposition. And I'm not hating on the people who organize in those spaces. We've organized in those spaces too. There's good people who actually want to make change. But the reality of the nonprofit industrial complex is also clear to a lot of us who've been involved in it, that it's not a way out. That in fact, we have to build our own independent working class organizations with our own program. And that program does not need to be narrow. that program has to actually weave together all of the different struggles that we're a part of, because all of them affect us. And so like every single thing that we do is building up our organization, our leaders, our struggles. Whenever people have to set up a table and defend their ideas and talk about what it is that we deserve and what is possible, what we can make possible, they are sharpening their own skills. They have to talk to their neighbors. They have to get organized. They have to develop and distribute leadership tasks among them. They have to find a space to have an event. They have to bring people to that event. You know, like we say, like if you can organize a birthday party, you can organize a protest. And just like you need to organize a protest, you also got to organize a birthday party. You got to organize all the things, because that's also the life of our communities. We're not just doing something every 2 years or every 4 years. This is a political project for a lifetime, that we actually have to transform this country. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And we just really can't afford to keep wasting our time, putting our energy into two parties who couldn't care less about us.
That's a fact. I really appreciate y'all's passion, first and foremost. I can tell that this is something that really is, that you're extremely passionate about and that you've dedicated your lives to, which is like something that for me is really admirable. I have a lot of friends in organizing spaces, and I've seen the nonprofit complex firsthand and seen how it has affected my friends who were organizers, and how they had to evidently divest from those spaces because they were completely burnt out and all of the resources went to paying people at the top, and not into actually helping the people that they're saying they're going to help. It's tax write-offs a lot of the time for the people who found them. Fine. But I also really wanted to touch upon what you were talking about, Claudia, about the ballot access. So you said 23 states right now. So what is kind of the strategy as far as how to get you guys on more ballots, or what it is that we would need from the people who are watching in order to participate in that and to be a part of that, so that we can get you on more ballots? Again, this is like, for me, speaking to y'all is kind of pulling back the veil, right? Is that's the main thing for me, is I want people to understand that there are more options and that there are more realities that we can be tapping into. Because like you said, Karina, this is not going to happen overnight. This is not a shift that's going to happen overnight. The general population in the United States, I feel like, hears the word socialist and screams and runs in the opposite direction. It's very scary. I'm of Cuban descent, so I know that I got people on my team, on my side of shit, like, why the fuck is this girl talking to socialists? Like, I remember, like, I've been told, "Eres socialista." You know what I mean? Like, I know all of the rhetoric that comes with it. So I would really like you to also clarify what it means to be a socialist, what the concept of socialism is for those who are unaware or who are only privy to the concept of socialism from the lens of US imperialism, so that people can really kind of get a grip of what it really means versus in definition versus in practice what's been happening, and why in practice it's difficult, not because the concept itself is flawed, but because the way that it's executed and the way that it's thwarted by by not just US but imperialist agenda, so that it cannot be, it never is given the opportunity to thrive in any kind of capacity. I would like for you guys to touch on that.
I really
Comrade
like that
Lauren.
question.
Yeah.
I really
Go
like
ahead,
that
Claudia.
question. From now on, she will be Comrade Lauren. Whether she takes that on is her, but you will be Comrade Lauren. It's a great question, because it's true. Like, we have, and you're from Caribbean descent, and maybe Karina has heard this term. Socialism has become the cuco, which is a very racist term, right? It's become like the spooky man. It's become like this. It's literally the second religion of the United States to be anti-communist or anti-socialist. And the level of persecution and the level of attacks towards socialism are only there because socialism provides solutions to the problems that capitalism creates and sustains. Punto. Period. That's what it is.
Final.
The capitalist system wants to creates conditions and then provides the prescription to deal with the symptoms, not the illness, but with the symptoms. Because if they were to solve the illness, capitalism will cease to exist. And so when we talk about socialism, I always like to bring up Fred Hampton, which was he was the youngest leader of the Black Panther Party at 19 years old, became the chairman of the National of the chapter in Chicago, in Illinois, and who did a lot of work from a socialist, from a communist perspective. And this man said, socialism is the people. Socialism is the people. And we've been taught to fear ourselves, to fear the capacity that we have to build the future that we need for ourselves. We are expected to do what the ruling class has imposed on us to do. And so this two lesser of two evils has been bullshit forever. I'm 43. I'm 43, and there's always some sort of like far right image that we need to fear. And then Democrats are supposed to be the ones to fight fascism, to fight far right, but they're just the opposite side of the same coin. And how do you fight being the same thing? And so when we're talking about socialism as an alternative to that system that creates poverty, that creates alienation, that is sustained by slavery, because people want to think that slavery was some sort of like it was ended. No, a certain type of slavery was ended, but there's still slavery. Like our society runs and is sustained by mass incarceration, which is another way of enslaving people.
Even the fact
provides
that private prisons exist is enough said.
Exactly.
You know, they literally make money off of imprisoning people. And they, in California right now, bipartisanly, they're trying to ban homelessness. And what are you going to do with homeless folks in that scenario?
While you're basically having empty buildings, and this is happening all across the country, empty buildings that are accumulating interest and are profitable for a person or a family. And while you have over 500,000 people living in homelessness, having to create tents in the, like, you're in LA, you've seen Skid Row, you know what I'm saying?
You see everywhere. Hollywood, West
looks.
Hollywood, anywhere.
Those of us who live in New York City, we've seen Times Square, we've seen people living in the streets, and therefore, like, we see what capitalism does, and we internalize what capitalism does, and what capitalism expects us to do is to normalize that. And socialists say that is not normal. That is not normal. It is not normal that 2 million children in this country are losing health care. That's not normal. It's not normal that 2 million families are losing WIC, which is basically a program that supports mothers and infants to get nutrition. It is not normal that people need to pay for education, that people need to go into debt to get an education. I've been to places where I'm like, yo, I am $90,000, $100,000 in debt because I did a dual degree in, in social work and theology. And people are like, what? And I'm speaking specifically when I've gone to Cuba, because I've been in Cuba, and people cannot perceive that I would indebt myself to a bank to be able to get an education, or that I have healthcare bills. And so we live in a society that is an ill society within capitalism. The attacks on countries like Cuba, Venezuela, and other countries does not allow for the socialist experiment to be able to develop. And when we talk about socialism in this country, it would be completely different, because this economy is not an economy of deficiency. It's an economy of abundance. It's just an economy that prioritizes policies that support the capitalists, because ultimately it is a capitalist running Congress. It is a capitalist running Senate. It is a capitalist in the Pentagon. It is a capitalist in the White House. And therefore, their so-called democracy and their so-called policies are there for profit and not for people. How is it that Cuba, under an embargo of 62 years, experiencing the theft of $15 million a day by the United States government, which is the wealthiest government in the world, $15 million a day, taken by the U.S. from the people of Cuba, stolen from those people, were able to create 5 vaccines, while the United States and Canada were hoarding vaccines and not allowing people to have access to equipment that was necessary in the global south. We need to question the system. Socialists make 5 vaccines, and being impoverished by U.S. imperialism, share those vaccines with the rest of the global south. Advance in medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and they're able to provide medical doctors with all sorts of expertise all over Africa, all over the Caribbean, all over the global south. And the United States doesn't have the capacity to do that, and actually charges their medical students crazy amount of a crazy amount. Only people that have wealth go through medical school without debt. That is, this society is a sick society. So when you ask, what is socialism? Socialism is the people. Socialism is prioritizing what allows us to develop as human beings, is the safety of our planet, is being able to care for the way in which we relate to the motherland, like how we produce things in a way that doesn't extract all of its resources and leaves it depleted. Capitalism is a complete opposite to that. And so, you know, people are like, socialism is a bad brand. Socialism isn't a brand, it's a political and an economic solution to the problems capitalism has created, that has historically created solutions for the masses of people and has historically been attacked and trumped by the US government.
And I want to say one thing too about it. I also think that the same type of anti-communism and socialism that maybe our parents grew up with is different. The moment has shifted. And this is crazy because they still have control. The capitalists have control of all of the schools. They have control of all the media, and they still have not, they lost the youth.
That's
the
right.
youth are more anti-capitalist than ever, even in a capitalist country. And that's not because of us. That's because of the undeniable realities of living under capitalism. Undeniable realities. Those are the things that have made socialists in this country, because we were born and raised in this country. I don't come from a socialist family.
Right.
I understood my experience in this country and saw that capitalism is actually the problem. That even if we were to succeed in our organizing efforts against Nike, and we were able to make Nike into a good capitalist, what does it mean under the capitalist system? All it means is that the investors who ultimately put their capital into not just the corporations that make a profit, but the corporations who make the highest rate of profit, right? And so those investors can decide, well, if this Nike is now treating workers well with dignified wages, that's not really giving me the profits that I want. I'm going to put my profits in this worst capitalist who is exploiting them more, because that's where I'm going to get a bigger rate of return. And so that means that now Nike's out, Reebok is in, but Reebok just got a hell of a lot bigger because it took all of the share of the market that Nike used to have. So this is not just a few bad apples. This is the capitalist system itself that creates this kind of inequality and these kinds of extremes. And this is like what we're talking about. And like, I have to say, it's not so bad for Mexicans. I know in Miami with Cubans, it's like there's more of it's sharper. But I have to say, in Cali, for Mexicans, we're not that hostile to socialists. And when we talk about what socialism is with people, we're not facing all this crazy opposition, honestly. Like, I had my dad and my brothers and my uncle come to our presentation, and they're not socialists. But when we talk about what Amazon did during the pandemic, and we talk about the amount of wealth that they were able to accumulate by themselves, exactly. The fact that we have a system where one person, they doubled their wealth, right? And that we have a system where one individual, Jeff Bezos, by himself, can accumulate the wealth that's been created by millions of people. And under this system, it's his right to do whatever he wants. And what did he do at the time when millions of people were sick and suffering? He decided to use that wealth not to help people, but to make his own personal private spaceship. That's what he used. While the Amazon workers are losing life and limb because the rate of profits that they're making were not enough for him, right? And so these workers are working 12, 14-hour shifts, completely disposable, all bruised up. That's not enough for them, right? And then this is the system where that kind of legalized exploitation, violence, he's allowed to do that. We're saying that we need a new system. That cannot be a possibility anymore.
Not only is he allowed to do that, it's glorified
exactly
by the average person, and it's covered by all Western media, and it is propped up as this kind of success story. That, because to me, what capitalism does, or what this U.S. imperialism does, is it says, "Oh, you can do this too.
Right.
This could be you one day. You could also accumulate this level of wealth." And I actually read this quote the other day that was like, "You are like closer to homelessness than you are to becoming a billionaire. Like the average person is like 3 missed paychecks away from becoming a billionaire. I mean, 3 missed paychecks away from
Homeless.
becoming homeless.
Yeah.
Then in comparison to like however long it takes to create whatever
Hundreds of
idea
years.
would be,
For
hundreds
sure.
of years to accumulate.
You know what's crazy? 160 million people in this country, close to half or a little bit more than half of the people in this country, are living near or in poverty. The wealthiest country. 800 lives a day in this country. 800 lives a day are lost in this country because of poverty-related issues. Is the
And
fourth
we call ourselves
leading is a fourth leading cause of death. Poor people are dying at alarming rates, and people are like, well, you know, poor people, the middle class people are poor people too, because the minute they stop getting paid, they're down that ladder.
They're back with us.
And that creation was a creation of capitalists to say exactly what you were alluding to, Lauren. Oh, you can make it here, you can make it, but we are poor people. For as long as we have to sell our labor to be able to survive, to these corporations, to these institutions, to these industries, we are working class people. And the need to be able to develop our class consciousness is so important. And the illusions that we are given, that we are imposed by the Democrats, by the Republicans, by the ruling class and all their institutions, is this idea that we could aspire to be like. But do we really want to be genocidal? Do we really want to be people who enslave and exploit other people? Do we want to be the people that are living in luxury lives at the expense of the majority of people, not only in this country, but in the world? That is what you have to do to be a Jeff Bezos. That is what you have to do. There is no good capitalist. And our point is, there shouldn't be a reason why a billionaire exists, because for as long as one billionaire exists, millions of people are suffering. Point blank. There's no reason why why is there Jeff Bezos has never gone and unloaded a truck. He will never know what it means to work in an Amazon storehouse, like a warehouse. He doesn't know. So why should he be getting millions of dollars, trillions, out of the exploitation of working class people? And then why should we sit down and take that
or idolize that, is what I'm seeing. It's beyond, because the thing is, I just feel like narrative wise, there's this glorification and idolization of wealthy people as if they've reached some sort of peak of what it means to be alive. And I think also to the point, we often talk about capitalism, and when capitalism first started out, the concept of a free market was probably really appealing to a lot of people. But when you really think about it, it's insatiable. And that's really the issue, is that it's kind of like a cancer.
It is.
Once cancer cells begin to formulate, they grow at rapid rates that evidently end up killing you, because that cellular growth is abnormal. And I relate that to the ways that what capitalism has become, is this insatiable system where the profits are never enough, and the only business model is to continue to grow profit, and it never considers the worker. It never considers all of the people who are a part of the ecosystem that allows that capital to be here in the first place. And we've seen, even especially with remote working since 2020, productivity is just, they need more and more and more and more and more productivity, and it's lessening and lessening and lessening the amount of time that we have to be human on this planet, that we have to connect with our families, to connect with our loved ones, to feel safe within a home. Like, more and more people or companies are buying up single family homes, and most people are only able to rent at this point, or they're renting an apartment. I know people who are living full families in apartments and can still barely pay rent, because a studio apartment in Los Angeles is $1,200 minimum.
That's right.
And if you really think about like what people are really getting paid, that's just completely unsustainable unless you're working multiple jobs. And if you're working multiple jobs, you're unable to take part in your own life. And at the end of the day, like, the concept of socialism isn't to eradicate these things. It is to to funnel the resources back into the people who create the resources to
Exactly
begin
it.
with.
That's exactly it. It's about redistribution.
Yep.
Reparation.
They already have
and
socialism for the rich
it's
and
about
capitalism for the poor.
it's about
That's what it is, right?
it's about redistribution by retaking, like actually expropriating, taking the wealth that we create and redistributing that wealth and reorganizing society in a way that prioritizes life. Like I like how you word it, Lauren, in terms of capitalism doesn't allow us to live like in any way, shape, or form. Like we engage as working class people in a lot of these holidays that are very commercial holidays because it gives us the opportunity to be with our family. Yeah. Not because in our core we believe in it. It's because it gives us the opportunity to be with our family.
It's
so we engage
slavery.
Yeah, so we engage in it because we kind of have to, because that's how society is organized. And so I think it's important to see it in that way. Like capitalism is definitely a system that promotes and imposes death and destruction on all of us, on working class people globally and the planet. And socialism seeks to preserve life and seeks to, like, this question of, I always tell people, because people connect socialism to like extraction, right? Like taking away. They're like, oh, you're gonna say it's gonna, no one can have proper private property. Well, if you buy a house and you get into a mortgage, you have to get a mortgage loan from a bank.
You don't own that shit, baby.
You don't own, exactly. You don't own the house. What you own is the debt. And so you have to pay the debt for 30, 40 years. What if you were guaranteed housing according to your needs? If you have a family that is a six-person family, you could have access to a house where you don't have to be all cramped up, but it's actually what you need. And you don't have to have a bank like basically enslaving you for 30, 40 years. That is what socialism is. If you need healthcare and you get sick and you go to the hospital, you're not asked what type of health insurance you have as the first question, because health insurance companies will be dismantled. There's no reason for that. There's no reason why medicine is created and you have to pay absorbent crazy amounts of money to be able to access that medicine. And so that is what we're talking about, socialism, cutting the billionaire class that profits from people's, like, the lacks of access to life. We want people to live. We want people to be happy. We want people to be healthy. We want communities to thrive. And that is connected to every aspect of our lives. And actually, in that process, allowing other people in the global south and the rest of the world to live. Because the U.S. empire doesn't allow other people to live either.
Well, yeah, we see that now in the Congo and the way that those folks are enslaved literally in front of our faces, so that we can have access to all these technologies, or these tech companies can be able to use slave labor, essentially, or not essentially, actually.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that, I think, across the board with a lot of these corporations, prison labor being used to, like, to me, it's all like cyclical. You know what I mean? Like, if in California, we're going to ban homelessness, right? It's illegal for you to not be able to afford housing. So now what does that mean? That means that you're subject to arrest if you are a houseless person. And if you're subject to arrest, you're put into the prison industrial complex, where your labor is then used to make other corporations insane amounts of money. I also see this exploitation with the immigrant community.
Yeah.
We like to use them as a scapegoat here in America as to why people aren't getting jobs. No, what's actually happening is these heads of these corporations are seeing that they can give them a slave wage, and that these people are going to work for that slave wage because they literally have no other choice, because they'll either be reported and deported, or they're not going to complain about whether or not they get paid for the hard labor that they're going to do. And also, this is hard labor that most Americans feel that they are above and won't do anyways. We're also not acknowledging the ways that AI is completely taking over. And that is actually what's leaving a lot of people jobless. I have many friends who have been laid off recently because they laid off hundreds of people because one AI machine can do the job of all those hundreds of people. We're not acknowledging that we're using, again, immigrants as a scapegoat, which is also included in that 95 billion that I was talking about. There's this whole political play going on right now to try to blame these immigrants who are coming from the global south who, by the way, have been steady streaming in the same kinds of numbers. It's not like this brand new problem that there is. This has always been here. We are a country built off of immigrant and slave labor, period. And it's the only way that America exists and the hegemony exists is because of the exploitation of labor that we experience here. And then politically, they use these people as pawns so that they can make the average American angry at that person instead of being aware of the fact that they're being manipulated by these exact people that they swear are their idols or they swear are their saviors or the potential that they can become. And the reality is, like, the American middle class has been completely decimated, but also the American middle class usually only consisted of white or white leaning or adjacent people, because the reality of the reason that we're in this scenario that we're in now is because those who have been in power since the inception of this country refuse to acknowledge Black and brown people as human beings, and they refuse for them to have the same access to things and access to all of the ways that socialism has already been introduced, such as Social Security, such as, you know, there's so many different programs that are in place, Medicare for all of these things are socialist concepts. They're concepts that allow us to take the resources that we create, because we are the ones doing the labor that makes these companies money, and then allowing that money to trickle into our own realities and our own futures and our own pockets, so that we can, you know, back in the days when during, I think it was Roosevelt, when Franklin D. Roosevelt was in office, he implemented so many socialist programs after the Great Depression, which, by the way, is nothing compared to what we're going through right now, financial crisis wise. If you do the rates of inflation, what's happening now is worse than the Great Depression. And we talk about the Great Depression like it was this crazy experience. It was the first time that white people experienced what Black people have been already experiencing in this country. And the response to that was a socialist agenda of reformation, which granted people free homes, which granted people, you know, the ability to get up on their shit and receive help from the government. But specific people received help.
Comrade Lauren.
Specific people received help. Not everyone received that help. And so there's those generations of Black folks, especially specifically, who have contributed to the labor source of this country for as long as they have been here and been brought here. Indigenous people as well. Okay, because we don't talk about the indigenous story ever, but they are also a part of this conversation, because they Israeled them. Same shit. Settlers came. They were like, I want this land, you're on this land, it belongs to you, but you don't have it in writing, in my specific writing, that it belongs to you. So I'm going to just take it from you, and I'm going to burn down your houses, and I'm going to terrorize you and take it from you, which is what they've done also in all Black communities that have been able to thrive since, and have been able to work with socialist kind of ideals with one another to build their own communities and to thrive in this world that they're a part of, whether they want to be or not. They don't have the choice, you know? But then we've also seen in US history the ways that we have completely decimated those communities. Like the Black Panther Party, for example. They were completely demonized, but they were socialist programs that they were implementing. Free education, making sure that kids got fed in these communities. Making free lunch, exactly. Making sure that people were politically aware. Making sure that people were gathering together amongst themselves to create spaces where they could thrive and live life and not be only subject to all of the racist and incredibly capitalist driven realities that were around them. And it's only gotten worse because inflation's gotten worse, because these companies realize, oh shit, we can just mark up the price and call it inflation, and these people will just keep paying for it because they don't have a choice, and because we don't know better, because we're uneducated about these things. So yeah, I feel like all of those kind of branches of it all are so important to touch upon when we're talking about like the grander scheme of what socialism means. People are very scared of the concept and the idea of it because they see like what they would call a failed state in Cuba, where the people are very much in real time suffering,
Yeah.
but they're able to not suffer all the way because of the socialist programs that they take care of one another
That's
with,
right.
such as the medical system that they have in place, such as, and the opportunities to progress are always denied them. And every time that they start to progress in another manner, there is thwarting that goes on, and
And
there's
that's
active
a
thwarting.
and that's a bipartisan decision. It's a Republican, and because ultimately we need to talk about the fact that it's not only genocide Joe or Trump. It's about the imperialist project, and it's about the capitalist project. So it's not about these individuals. I mean, if you look back, you'll see, Obama attempted to normalize it, but he attempted to normalize it because it was also of the interest of the United States to do so. But Biden came back and he actually tweaked and hardened the
Trump.
sanctions
Yeah.
against Venezuela.
Trump did that.
Well, Trump did that, but Biden has maintained it.
Biden maintained it, yeah. But after
Trump,
Obama, Trump
yeah,
was the one who shifted,
Yeah.
who actually put an even harder embargo on the Cuban people. I have an amazing series that I found on YouTube that I'll post about the situation in Cuba, the war on Cuba. That's informed me exponentially, like, because obviously I grew up in America to Cuban parents who my grandparents fled when everything with Fidel was happening, and so I grew up believing and being programmed into believing that socialism and communism are the devil.
Yeah.
Like they're what destroyed everything. They're the reason why we're not where we are and why we're not in our country and all of these things, and again, this is just ignorance being breeded down, because there is, especially back in my grandparents' day, we didn't have access to the internet.
That's
We didn't
right.
have access to anything outside of what we're being
And
told is the truth.
you
They
didn't
had the
get to go back.
radio and they had the newspaper, el periódico, okay? And my grandpa would sit there with his periódico, and that was what he would read. You know what I mean? So, there's a whole bunch of access now that we do not, that their generations did not have. So I don't blame them. And I trust their ability to grow and learn and expand. But there's also this very deep fear that is intergenerational. It's the same kind of thing that we're seeing with what's happening in Israel. This is a very real intergenerational trauma that is the reality for a lot of people. It lives in your body for generations. Ahora soy yo la pendeja, okay? I'm so sorry, guys. My phone died. My phone died. Ugh, that was such a good conversation, and I'm so sad that I couldn't save it. I'm so sorry. Ay, Dios mío. I'm so sorry. But you know what? Like, technology! I'm trying, guys. I'm trying to be her friend. I was so into the conversation, I didn't realize when it told me I had 10%, I just swiped it off. Ay, Dios mío, I'm so sorry. Uy, Dios. Pero it's okay. We'll get back into it. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. That was a good one.
La tercera es la vencida.
La tercera, aquí estamos. I'm so sorry. My phone died. I was so into the conversation, I kept ignoring the messages.
It's all good. It's all good.
No, it's
We got
all
to
good.
do this again. That's
Dang,
what the
that was
show
a good one though. When we were I was like, no. So hopefully somebody recorded that part of the conversation. Who knows?
And if they did, post and tag.
Yeah, guys, if anybody got that footage, please send it to me or to Claudia or Karina. Please. I'm so sorry.
No,
oh my god, that was a good one too.
Listen,
I was like,
it's part of this tech
part
life.
of the tech life, truly. But yeah, we were just getting even further into dang, we really went into it that time. That's why I'm like, coño. But I would just like to thank you guys more than anything. I'm not gonna post this one because we're so out of the. But I have part 1 up of that we did, and it uploaded. Thank you, tech gods. We love you. Because sometimes, dude, I've had lives and it literally like won't post like after I do it. I'm just like, what the heck? But yeah, if there's anything else that you guys would like to add or kind of share before we head out, because I know it's already been like even longer than an hour.
Yeah.
So I don't want to keep people like too in it, but we can do it. Definitely do a part two of
I
the
think
situation.
I want a part two. If we could do a part two, I think it'd be great to do a part two. I feel like we just started. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff we could still talk about.
for
And I
sure.
think ultimately it would be good to talk. We wanted to talk or cover a little bit more on the platform because a lot of people raise questions about, like, the biggest question is like, but what about the policies? And we wanted to kind of invite people to think about policies in a different way, mostly because policies within capitalism, again, with the capitalist ruling class parties, are there only to serve the ruling class. They're concessions. And that's why we see, for example, in the immigrant rights movement, that every so often they will concede certain rights to immigrants and then pull them back, and then concede some and then pull them back. The same thing
Hmm.
happens with labor. The same happens with women's rights. And
That
all of these rights are rights that movements fight for, and then they concede so that they don't turn into movements that are strong enough to be able to tackle the actual system. And what
mhm.
That's like the
they and what they fear most is that all these movements actually come together and figure out that the root cause of this is capitalism. And so
Mhm.
when we thought about the platform, and we say we, not beyond my Karina and myself, because it's part of a party program from a
Yeah, I would
socialist.
love for you to get into the party that y'all are running for, because I know that there's also like some controversial stuff going on around the PSL party because of past things, but I also really want y'all to just confront that and talk about it so that, you know, people can understand that that is separate from y'all's campaign and you two as people. It's outside of that, and the way it was handled
Yeah.
too is like a part of the
and we
process as
could
well.
and we could address that now, and maybe, but again, in terms of like policies, what we're proposing is the uprooting of capitalism. When we're saying seize the top 100 corporations and cut the military budget by 90%, we're talking about being able to extract the funds that have been stolen by from the majority of the people in this country by billionaires, to be able to put that wealth to work for working class people. And when we talk about policy, that is what our policy is connected to be able to create policies for the people and not for profit, while having a socialist government that ultimately creates a socialist structure and policies and all the institutions that are necessary to uphold that. Because
Yeah, kind of like the fact that it's intersectional. I feel like
yeah,
this, analogy wise, like in the American medical industrial complex, we isolate and have specialists
yeah,
for like each individual
yeah,
organ or
that's right.
each individual system. But at the end of the day, the body works as a functioning
Yeah,
ecosystem,
That's
and it
exactly
is all of the things affect everything. You can't get to the source root cause of a problem by putting a band-aid on a symptom.
that's right.
That's never going to be the actual solution for you to reach optimal health. You have to get to the actual root cause of the issue in order for you to be able to treat that root cause and then reach a point where everything stabilizes and you get into better health. It's the same concept with capitalism, or with the government, or the concept of a government, which is essentially just someone who's regulating resources.
Mm-hmm.
All of our resources are funneled together into taxes into a big pot, and then the people that we place in charge of handling this big pot, they get to decide where that is situated and what receives what amount of money. And if you look at any proposed budget by any Democrat or any
Mm-hmm.
Republican, you will see that their number one priority is imperialism and
It's war,
abroad.
but
It's war.
mm-hmm.
Because what does war do? War destabilizes our competitors. War destabilizes people who can compete with U.S. hegemony, and
Mm-hmm.
it also furthers their interests. So it
Mm-hmm.
furthers interests of resource grabs, of free labor grabs, and making sure that their systems are kept at bay, right? Kept rooted. We have very deep indoctrination about what the military does and why it does it. Fighting for freedom is a hilarious hilarious to me, like a complete joke
Mm-hmm.
of a perspective on what we do when we're overseas. And there is insurmountable proof, not only as it happens, but in our veterans who come home.
Yeah.
PTSD to the teeth. They're
Yeah.
not taken care of. They are, so many of them are on the streets. So many of them are extremely violent, become abusers, become alcoholics, and not all of them. You know, there are all kinds of vets out there. There are a lot of vets who are aware of what happened
Yeah.
and who
Yeah.
are actively speaking out against what they were required to do, because
Mm-hmm.
most people get involved with the military to begin with because they pay for shit for free. There's socialism in the military.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go into the military, you get your housing paid for, you get your education paid for, and a lot of people don't have those options available to them. And where does military recruit the most? In poor
From working
income
class schools.
communities.
Poverty jobs. That's what
Poverty,
they do.
poverty driven
Poverty jobs.
communities.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's super vital and important to see those connections and to understand that, like you're proposing a 90% cut to the military
Yeah.
budget.
The limited budget. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And it.
if we take that
Mhm.
money and we think about what can we do with that money for the people of the United States, like for the people,
Mm-hmm.
we could literally change the entire landscape of our reality as the average American in here. You know what
We're
I mean?
talking
Like
about trillions of
trillions.
dollars, trillions of dollars. Because right now it's like over $800 billion that is like officially listed. But think about all the other things that are not unofficially listed
They also
by the
don't
Pentagon.
pass audits. They
Yeah,
never passed a single
yeah.
audit. Let's say that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why the hell would any country need over 800 military bases all across the world? Why is it that this country provides police in the global south with trainings when they are so brutal and so violent, and also receive the US police force receives training from the IDF, and we see what the IDF does in Israel. So like we need to be able to see all these connections and see why US imperialism and US capital work the way that they do, and everything is interconnected and everything is rooted within a capitalist system, which is ultimately the illness that we need to be dealing with, not the symptoms, because dealing with the symptoms does not fix it.
No. And that's
And I think,
what we're manipulated, you know what I mean? A lot of, like you were talking about, the two-party system, it creates the conditions where they ping pong issues.
yeah.
They're like, oh, like for example, Biden in 2020 ran his entire platform and gained the traction that he did because he was promising to forgive student loan debt, because he was promising free Medicare for all,
Mm-hmm.
because he was promising all of these very, intense talking points. If you look at Biden's website right now, he has zero of these talking points. He doesn't even have policies that he's trying to push. He's just like, we're going to save you. It's either us or fascism.
Yeah.
And the reality of what they show us, whether this space that they're presenting to us tells us one thing, you have to look at the actions and you need to look at the donors. Where's the money coming from for these campaigns? Because like Claudia said earlier, the money is whoever is providing the funds is who those people are going to be
Accountable to.
accountable to. Exactly. Because, and that's how
Yeah.
it works in capitalism. Your investors are the people that you're accountable to. Your shareholders are who these companies are beholden to, not their workers, not their laborers, not the people
Mm-hmm.
who are building and creating the capital that they even get to siphon off to shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All of these systems are very reflective of one another.
And I think that a lot of people are drawing similar conclusions too. Like, that's the thing. We don't think we're special. Like, we think a lot of people, if we're able to draw these conclusions, millions of people are able to draw these conclusions. And in fact, that's the point. When we actually go and talk to people, we don't have to do a lot of convincing because people already know that the system is bankrupt. What they don't know is there an alternative? Like, is there a reason to get up in the morning and be part of an organization, and what's going to make the difference? That's what some people don't know. They're not sure what is going to make the difference. And that's why it's such an important part of our campaign to talk about building a political organization, because that's very important. Like you mentioned earlier about FDR. And like, they could celebrate FDR because FDR was part of the ruling class. But FDR would not pass all of those social programs had it not been for the Communist Party. The Communist Party was organizing. They had thousands of members. And that's a reality. Like, the politicians respond to the organization of another force. And that was the Communist Party. especially in the 30s, and they did unemployment cancels. They did all kinds of organizing. They put people back in their houses when they were kicked out by the police. They moved them back in. And so like that's the kind of everyday politics that we're talking about. And that's the history that's also like erased.
Because
Erased.
the Red Scare happened.
That's
also.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something that's really important to talk about too, I think, is the reason why we believe, or most of us believe, that there's only a two-party option is because of the role that Western media, billionaire-owned media corporations, okay, have in narrative spinning. We've seen it clear as day when it comes to the Israel-Palestine situation. The ways in which we are manipulated on a regular basis by these media sources and companies, and the passive journalism, the ways in which we are convinced of a narrative or sold a narrative, because most of us are only reading headlines. We're not actually reading full articles. Most of us are not doing our own critical thinking or finding our news source outside of these billionaire-backed media companies. And so billionaire-backed media companies are always going to push the narrative that they need you to believe in order for you to play along with the game.
And even with all that control, they still lost the narrative. That's the other side of it.
Still lost the narrative.
Aware of that.
Shout out to TikTok.
Aware of our own strength. That they still lost the narrative. They have been repeated the same thing over. They still have control over the media, and yet the majority of the people stand with Palestine.
The thing is that
despite all, they're not insurmountable. Like they're not unstoppable. They're not invincible.
This is a live stream. There's a live stream genocide. Literally. People are seeing kids being like, how can you not be moved against capitalism and against the U.S. empire and the colonial state of Israel when you see this? Like there, you can't unsee that. You can't forget that. You can't, like,
I'm never going to be able to unsee what I've seen.
Your most human, like, insides just move to a point of,
if you got any,
you know, compassion for the majority of the working class. Because I think working class people, like, in our own teachings and how to, like, organically relate to each other, our values are very different from the values of the ruling class. The way that we relate to each other are very much based on solidarity. Like, we can't see the bombing that's taking place, the wiping out of a people, and not think about our own experiences, you know, not think about our own people, not think about our own communities. The same type of disregard that the U.S. empire has for our kids and our communities is the same type of disregard that they have for the young. Like, we're not seen as human. We're seen as, you know,
collateral.
Collateral damage, and we seen as things that produce wealth for them. That is all we are. And so that level of carelessness and disregard and neglect and all of that, like, just disrespect is the same that we see in our communities. And so we're in a level of consciousness right now, and that's what I was saying. Historically, people's consciousness have shifted because the betrayal has been so deep. The betrayal has been so consistent. The lies have been so consistent. Like, the same people that lie,
same playbook. They don't even change the rhetoric.
They don't care. They don't care to. The same people that don't care about killing, you know, the killing of young black men and brown men in the streets by police officers like Mike Brown, like vigilantes, like the one that killed Trayvon Martin. Like, these are the people who are lying to us on the news every time there's a killing, that are also lying to us about what's happening in Gaza, that are also lying to us about what happens in the Congo, that also, these are the same. So we have another level of consciousness at this point that we cannot allow to digress. Agreed. That we cannot just hand over to the Democrats and the Republicans and the ruling class and say, you know what, maybe you'll be doing better next time. Because the reality is that historically, they've never done better. They actually done well.
And I think the solution is not in individualism. That's the other side of it. The solution has to be in collectivity. The solution has to be as part of an organized working class, because individually, that's how they keep us sad,
depressed,
disorganized, depressed. But like, the thing that has changed, and this is true, I know this is true for both Claudia and I, like, we're not just fucking hopeful because we're like positive people. We're hopeful because we have
people.
We are
materially. But
it's not just because of that. It's because we are part of a collective where we are organizing with other working class people around all the different struggles that affect our communities, and that gives us life. that gives us confidence in our class, seeing our own people. Like, I'm not just a socialist because I have the ideas of socialism. I've seen socialism in other people, in the way that they conduct themselves, in the way that they hold down and organize their communities. In Texas, when I was going to the Valley all the time, one of the poorest parts of the country, they might not have identified themselves as socialists,
Right.
but they were living and acting like socialists, because the way that they were organizing themselves to fight for resources, to help each other in all the struggles, whether it's ICE raids, whether it's fighting, you know, against the stolen wages, everything. It's in a socialist organized fashion. And that gives us confidence in the possibilities of what we're trying to build. But you can't do that on your own. You can't do that by yourself. And you can't do that with just voting in one campaign. It's actually being a part of an organization.
That part of being a part of a political organization is also important, because you're not talking necessarily based on, again, individual experiences. You're talking about collective experiences. So for us to talk about the working class, we could talk about our own individual experiences all the time, but those individual experiences are connected to a larger community. They're connected to the communities that we've engaged in building struggle with. They're connected to all the different campaigns, from housing, against police brutality, for healthcare, for education. Like, that platform that was created, again, comes from years of struggle that is collective and is part of an agenda and a platform and a political program of a party, of an organization. And one of the biggest things that capitalism has done is convince us that somehow we are only responsible for ourselves, and that we can individually solve problems. And if we can't individually solve problems, then we can just kind of like consume ourselves with depression, and that's it. Like, those are the only options, and those are not the only options. Historically, only social movements, only political organizations, only groups of people have been able to change and transform society. And in the moments that we haven't been able to do that, we have shifted the political discourse. We have shifted it. And so I think we need to gain confidence from what we can do collectively, and actually identify organizations and groupings of people that could give us the strength, that could give us the ideology, that could give us the sharpness politically to do the work that we need to do. It's disciplined work. It requires militancy. It requires sacrifice. And we're taught that all those things are things that we don't need to deal with. We just need to be able to go and kind of check a vote, and that's it. And if we don't do that, then we could just keep on struggling and do it on our own. And that's not enough.
No,
that's not enough.
And I also want to touch back to what you were talking about, how the consciousness of this moment is elevated in such a way that it's unprecedented in human history so far, because of the way that we're interconnected through technology. This has never been seen before. So obviously we can never see the success of what it could look like if we actually move together as not only a community here in the United States, but like you said, as an international family, as a collective outside of just this US individualist mentality and hegemony. Because, you know, we were talking about the Great Depression in the 1930s and FDR in the 1930s, and how that happened because of the Communist Party, but then came the communist organizing, but then came the Red Scare, right? And what was possible then was there was one source of news. You got your news off of a television screen that they filtered for you, or you got your news from the newspapers that they wrote for you. So now we have a connection to one another globally. I can talk to somebody in Japan right now if I want to. Okay? Like, that is an unprecedented reality. So that hopelessness that was maybe attached to these conversations before, or that idea that, like, oh, that'll never happen, or this could never happen, we really have to kill that. We really have to align ourselves with how beautiful of an imagination we're allowed to have now, because we can see one another. There are 538 people here right now, but there were thousands of people in here at different points of this life. Okay? We can talk to one another. We can see one another. You can tell me your story. I can relate to your story. We see that with the Palestinian movement right now. We see how so many of us who have experienced the effects of US capitalism and imperialism on our own families, in our own lives, on our own grandparents, we see the correlation between what we are now seeing happen to the Palestinian people. The Armenian people can see it. The Romani people can see it. The Jewish people can see it outside of the Zionists. Okay, all of these are all stories and histories that have a direct connection to the ways in which empire has moved and disenfranchised people and the communities and organizations outside of ourselves. They did it to the Black Panther Party. They completely infiltrated and decimated and imprisoned these people who were literally just trying to make tangible realities better and more collectively beneficial to Black folks in America. These are realities that maybe then weren't possible to we weren't able to combat the propaganda that consumed our brains, but today we can. Today we can. We can, and we can look at one another in the eyes or through a screen and say, I see you, girl. I'm going through the same thing. I see what you're talking about because I'm experiencing it too. And what we really need to do now, though, because this is what I'm seeing is a lot of people outraged, a lot of people talking about they're not going to vote for Biden, they're not going to vote for Trump, fuck it all, we're not going to vote at all. I understand that perspective, but that perspective is giving up your power again. We need to organize. We need to find a political home. We need to find a communal home. You need to go out, look locally. What are the people in my area doing for people like me? How can I be a part of it? How can I lend my time, energy, resources, whatever you can contribute to these organizations, and how can I be a part of the liberation movement? Because this is not, like they said, this is not going to happen overnight. Claudia and Karina themselves are only on 23 ballots as of right now, but it takes community organizing to get them on all 50 ballots. It takes community organizing to even get these kinds of messages out beyond our silos of conversation. So it takes us understanding that we're a part of something bigger than just our individual realities. And that is really a huge reason why I really wanted to have you guys on. Like, I'm not kind of disillusioned in believing that we're going to topple the two-party system, altogether now, I do think it's possible, but I do think there's a lot of indoctrination that is still very prevalent in our communities that needs to be taught. We need to be educated out of it. We need to be politicized. We need to be organized more than anything right now. And so I really want to have these conversations so people can, again, use your imagination. Use your imagination. We don't have to just, oh shit, they're gonna do this again with our money. What if they did this? What if they did that? What if they did that?
You know what the crazy thing is, that we are working class people as a class. We are intelligent. We are creative. We have imagination. We have the energy. A lot of the times we have a lot of the solutions in our communal spaces, and the ways in which we organically organize ourselves to take care of each other, take care of our children, take care of whatever needs we have amongst each other. And the biggest problem is that we give all of that to the ruling class. And then we say we can't do it. And you're doing it because you're surviving every day in this hellhole, which is a capitalist society. We are doing it. The question is, in whose benefit will you do what you do? Are you going to do what you do in the benefit of working class people? Are you going to do what you do in the benefit of an individual? What are you going to do? Everything should be on the basis of, in whose interest do I do what I do? Like the way that Karina started, in terms of like thanking you for using your platform to do this. There could be a lot of artists utilizing their platform to precisely do exactly what you're doing right now, but they're married to capitalist ideologies and married to what the bribery of capitalism is, and so they don't do it. They don't dare to do that. You need to be bold and courageous and creative to think beyond what we have been imposed to think and accept. And so as working class people, we need to gain the confidence. And gaining that confidence, I mean, I always think about capitalism, I always talk about capitalism as the most toxic relationship any human being could possibly engage.
Abusive.
It's toxic.
Gaslighting
ass. It's abusive. It's gaslighting. It's terror. And so in an abusive relationship, it takes a while. And sometimes you'll come out of the relationship and you'll come back to the relationship, and then you go out again until you find your path. but you need to at least try to get out of the relationship, because otherwise you might end up dead. And it might be triggering for folks to hear this, but it is real. It is that type of, it's brutal, it's violent, it's the most vile relationship you could possibly find.
Yeah.
And so we need to gather the strength, and we can never do that on on our own. We always need collectives and communities of people to support us in that process.
Yeah.
And so what we're saying is we need to build the organizations and the independent movement of working class people that are not the nonprofits, that are not, you know, just loose collectives, that are actually organizations that build us up, that build our confidence to speak out against the system that does such horrendous things against us, to be able to build the communities in the ways in which they're not, people are not barely surviving, where people are actually thriving. And there needs to be courage in that. There needs to be bravery in that. There needs to be the understanding of how valuable we are. We are so valuable that capitalism cannot exist without us. We need to consent to it.
Like I said earlier, it's consented slavery is what it is.
We need to consent to it.
We're the only ones that can save ourselves from
That's
it.
right.
No magical right or left wing of the two-headed beast is going to be our saving grace in this scenario. It is just, and it's a reality that they prove to us over and over and over again. To me, I'm not even going front, I was still very much liberal minded, even in 2020. You know, I was 23 years old, 22 years old when Biden was running again. I had major trauma during Trump's presidency. In 2016, I was 18 years old. Like I was voting for the first time. You know what I mean? So I was still very disillusioned. I was still very much clouded and shrouded in there's only a two-party system and this is the two that exists. And I talked about Jill Stein during before when Biden was going to be elected. I got fucking annihilated for even bringing the name up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's been since 2016. That's 11 years now that we have been exposed on a grand scale to the ways in which the right and the left ping pong issues and promise that they're going to be the savior of your problem, while getting backed by the same exact donors on both sides, all of which are of corporate interests, lobbyists who only have shareholder interests and growth at their core and at their essence. And money in politics has completely corrupted everything, has always corrupted everything. And at the end of the day, babes, this entire system was not built for the average person. This system was built by a certain type of people for these people. And we need to take that power back because we have the power in our hands. We are the labor. Nothing goes without us. Nothing gets done without us saying, okay, yeah, sure, I'll show up for work. Or okay, yeah, sure, I'm gonna give you my tax dollars. Okay, yeah, sure, I'm just gonna keep playing this because I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be in trouble. I don't want to have to suffer any kinds of consequences. But if we organize and we create realities where we take care of one another outside of those systems, that's the true power right there. That's the real power, and that's what's gonna actually shift our realities in such a way where we get to thrive and not just pretend we're surviving while we all mentally go insane.
That's right.
Because that's what's happening right now. You know?
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing happening. And guess what? Big Pharma loves that shit. Big Pharma loves that we're mentally incapacitated. And the insurance companies love that we're super sick and that we don't care about one another and that we're not going to get to the root cause of a problem, that we'd rather just go to 17 different doctors for them to all tell us there's nothing wrong with us and that we're fine, and then end up being like, oh, actually I have this super serious illness that no one was able to tell me I have because no one was looking for the root of the problem.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's such a reality of the overall system, right? Like they create the condition, they create the conditions of poverty, they create the conditions of deficiencies in our communities, they create the conditions, they blame us, and then they try to offer solutions that ultimately will be a band-aid that people will have to continue to fight for these things. Like the right to abortion, for example, is a huge, people fought, you know, all through and through, people fought for this right that wasn't safeguarded by the capitalists because it creates a talking point for them. It creates another issue for them to continue to, like,
Dangle.
you know, hang over our heads and say, do you want this? Do you want this? Maybe if you choose me, then you'll have it. And then they'll just forget about it, right? They use it
I mean, they
as
did
a
that
talking point.
so wholeheartedly with the Dreamers Act. They
Yeah.
did that with student debt. Hello.
Yeah.
He literally said, I'm going to forgive all your student debt. And then when he can't do it, he's like, oh, they blocked me. The GOP blocked me. They're such bad people.
But
if you
nobody
keep voting
ever
for them,
blocks him.
How about, why didn't anybody
countries?
block you? Why didn't anybody block you to send more weapons and money to Israel, though?
Hello?
You were able to bypass that one.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so you can
Exactly.
bypass when you want to, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting. You know, these people keep showing their asses, and at the end of the day, we can keep being gaslit. That is one of the options for sure. Or we can really talk about imagine the different possibilities of when we collectively gather together, what can we create for us, for our families, for the earth, for the future generations that will come after us, you know? That's all.
Welcome to the campaign, Lauren.
Listen, Comrade Lauren. Listen. But like the radical imagination that you speak about, there could not have been any advancement of our people without the radical imagination of so many people. And we have been so intentionally dismembered as a class, ripped apart from our lineage, ripped apart from our histories, ripped apart from everything that makes us whole, because it benefits capitalism. And so we need to look back also, like do the Sankofa move, look back to look forward. Where is our history? Like, who are the people that fought for housing in the 30s that Karina was talking about? Who are the people that fought for labor rights in the moments of the highest attacks against workers? Who were the folks that fought, you know, for every and each of the rights that we have in a very limited way? We're having this political discussion today, and it was crazy. The Constitution actually protects private property, but it doesn't have any protection of human and civil rights for people. It doesn't say housing is a human right and everybody should be guaranteed a housing. It doesn't say healthcare is a human right and healthcare should be guaranteed for everybody. It has been amended 27 times since 1789, but it has not been made relevant to the reality of people now. What does that say about our so-called democracy? What does it say when the 13th Amendment says, yeah, slavery has been abolished
unless you're
for the people in prison?
Criminal.
You know,
and then we have private prisons.
And then you go and criminalize entire communities and pump up, because I mean, who controls the ports, right? Pump in all sorts of shit into our communities and then make them the criminals. And so we need to think critically about what the enemy has done to dismember our historical memory, what it has done to dismember our bodies, what it continues to do to dismember the relationships between one another. It is, the enemy will never tell us who our friends are. They will criminalize and demonize who our friends are, and we need to be conscious of that. They've done it with Gaza, they've done it with Cuba, they've done it with Venezuela again, they've done it with every country that has ever resisted this devilish, this demonic system that we have. And those are our people. That's our lineage. You know, I'm Dominican. When I think about the Dominican Republic, I think of the Mirabal sisters who fought the dictatorship. I think of Francisco Alberto Camaño. I think of people that stood up to U.S. imperialism and said, you know what? You're not our friends. And I think about them because my grandmother survived 32 years of the dictatorship and worked hand in hand with Haitians in sugar plantations, because that's what they were, rice plantations, because that's what they were. And she survived that as a Black Dominican woman. And she knew in her very working class gut that the U.S. government administrations were not friends to the global South. And so we need to know that too. We can't be complicit.
100%. 100%. Bueno, thank you guys so much for your time, for your knowledge, for your imaginations and your bravery through this battle. Because I know it's hard to be on the receiving end of a lot of the criticism that comes. And I know it's hard to like fight for your own voice and the truth of what you're trying to say when you're constantly being smeared left and right, and, you know, things being thrown at you that have nothing to do with you. And aren't at all what your ideals are or stand for, it's real hard out here to be for the people.
It is. It is. But we got to keep
But
doing it.
yeah, and I hope that for those of you watching, I hope that this is able to kind of put a new perspective into your energy. Maybe I want you to do your own research. I say this all the time. I'm presenting you with, you know, other options to what we are being told are our only options. I'm presenting you with ideals and concepts that probably are unfamiliar to you. So I encourage you to educate yourself beyond what you've heard here today. I want you to think for yourself, first and foremost. I don't want you to ever take anything that's said by any of us at face value. I want you to do your own research. I want you to seek out your own definitions, your own defining energies, and understanding what it is that you're passionate about. How do you want, what are you imagining for a future? And how can you join hands with someone else who is imagining that same future with you, like us? You know what I mean? What was y'all's campaign website? Is Vote
Vote
Socialist
Socialist.
2024.
Yeah, votesocialist2024.com.
If you want to
Folks could go there.
look
They can
further
register
into,
to
like,
volunteer.
yeah, if you want to register to volunteer, if you want to, you know, get involved with the PSL party, if you want to learn more about Claudia and Karina, they have a bunch of information up there. They have their campaign video that says a lot of great information as well. And yeah, I want you guys to just like open up your minds and your hearts to the potential that we have here on this land, to really be able to create new realities that take care of us, take care of our futures, and take care of our children more than anything, you know? So thank you
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you,
so much.
Comrade Lauren. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you so
Mwah.
much. Bye.
Bye.